You're not unambitious. You're just tired. There's a woman in Stockholm named Maya. She works in a creative tech company, does brilliant work, leads a small team, and has never, in 7 years, answered a work email after 5 p.m. Not because she doesn't care. Not because she's lazy or uncommitted. She leaves at 5 because the Swedish model of work says something radical. Your nervous system is not a renewable resource. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, someone is sitting at their desk at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. The office is mostly empty, but their laptop is still glowing. They've checked their email 16 times in the last hour. They're not actually working anymore. They're just available. And availability, they've been taught, is the same as ambition. What if the difference between burnout and sustainability has nothing to do with how hard you work, and everything to do with when you stop? Sweden has one of the highest productivity rates in the world. Per hour worked, Swedish employees produce more value than nearly every other industrialized nation. But they do it in fewer hours. How? Not because they're genetically gifted, not because they've found a secret hack, because they understand something fundamental about how your nervous system actually functions. Your body was designed for rhythm. Work, then rest. Effort, then recovery. Stress, then peace. But the American model collapses this rhythm entirely. You work, and work, and work. And maybe on Sunday you try to rest, but your nervous system never actually switched off, so rest doesn't happen. You're just exhausted in a different location. This creates a cascade: chronic elevation of cortisol, weakened immune system, decreased creative capacity, slower thinking, more mistakes. The irony is brutal. Working longer hours actually makes you worse at your job. But Maya leaves at 5, and her work speaks for itself. Here's what happens when you stop at 5. The first thing your nervous system does is begin downshifting. Not immediately, not completely, but the chemical signal that says you're still in performance mode begins to fade. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, starts to activate. This doesn't happen if you're answering emails at 8 p.m. The moment you read that notification, cortisol spikes again. Your nervous system reads it as a new task, a new urgency, and you never descend into actual rest. But if you stop at 5, if you physically leave the office, put your phone in another room, and don't look at work communication, something remarkable happens. Your body begins the actual process of recovery. Cortisol drops. Digestive function normalizes. Your immune system has space to repair. Your creative systems, which need deep rest to function, actually rest. There's research from Stanford on this. When workers are allowed genuine off hours, not the fake off hours where you're technically not working, but you're still checking email, their productivity the next day increases by an average of 23%. Not because they're more motivated, because their nervous systems actually recovered. The Swedes don't discover this by reading research papers. They discovered it by building a culture where 5 p.m. means something. It's not a suggestion. It's not a personal failure if you leave on time. It's the boundary that makes the work sustainable. In most American companies, leaving at 5 sends a message. I'm not serious about this job. In Sweden, leaving at 5 sends a message. I'm serious enough about my work to be able to do it well tomorrow and the day after that, and for the next 40 years without burning out. This is the second invisible shift. It's called boundaries as productivity, not as laziness, not as lack of ambition, as the structural requirement for long-term excellence. Maya's team knows this. When someone stays late at her company, it's not praised. It's questioned, because staying late means something went wrong. Either the project wasn't planned properly, or the person isn't managing their time well, or the company is taking on too much work. Staying late is a failure signal, not a success signal. Compare this to the American corporate culture where the person who stays latest is seen as most committed, where burnout is treated like a badge of honor, where the person who leaves at 5 is seen as not caring enough. This creates a perverse incentive structure. People stay late not because the work requires it, but because visibility equals value in that system. And the result is an entire nation of exhausted, creative, immune-suppressed workers who produce less per hour and feel like they're failing. The third invisible shift is what happens after 5 p.m. in the Swedish model. It's not leisure time where you're secretly working. It's actual life. Maya goes to a cafe. She walks through Stockholm. She meets friends. She reads a book. She cooks dinner slowly. She sits in her apartment and does absolutely nothing and doesn't feel guilty about it. This is where the real magic happens. Because rest isn't just the absence of work. Rest is the presence of things that make you feel alive, things that fill you up instead of drain you. When you're constantly available for work, you don't have space for these things. You're always partially at the office, even when you're physically gone. Your attention is fragmented. Your nervous system never fully lands anywhere. But Maya's attention lands. Because at 5 p.m., the office closes. Not just physically, mentally. She knows that nothing will be asked of her until tomorrow morning, so she can actually be present for her evening. And that presence, that deep, undivided attention to her own life, is restorative in a way that no amount of weekend self-care can replicate. There's neuroscience on this, too. Your brain's default mode network, the system that handles creativity, insight, emotional processing, and meaning-making, only fully activates when you're not in task-focused mode. But in most American jobs, you're in task-focused mode until late evening. Your default mode network barely gets space to function. So creativity goes down, emotional processing gets backed up, and you feel empty even though you've been productive. But if you stop at 5, if you have actual evening time, your brain has space to do the work it was designed to do. The deep work, the meaningful work, the work that makes you feel like your life matters. This is the fourth invisible shift. It's called the creativity paradox. You produce better work when you work fewer hours because your brain has space to think deeply, not just execute tasks. Here's the part that most American workers don't understand about the Swedish model. It's not that Swedes work less because they're lazy. It's that Swedish companies have structured work so that it's efficient enough to be done in fewer hours, which means the work itself has to be better. Projects have to be planned. Meetings have to be purposeful. Communication has to be clear. Deadlines have to be realistic. In American companies, the model is different. Projects aren't as carefully planned because you can just work longer to make up for poor planning. Meetings meander because you have time to meander. Communication is unclear because you can clarify over multiple emails. Deadlines are unrealistic because everyone will just work weekends to hit them. So the American model actually creates more low-quality work, and it burns people out in the process. Maya's company doesn't allow this. Everything has to work within the 5 p.m. boundary, which means everything has to work better, tighter, clearer, more thoughtfully designed. The fifth invisible shift is the one that impacts long-term career success, and it's the one almost nobody talks about. It's called sustainable excellence. The person who works 50 hours a week for 30 years burns out around year 8. The person who works 40 hours a week for 30 years not only survives but actually excels because they have the mental and emotional capacity to learn, grow, and adapt over decades. Maya has colleagues from the American office of the same company, same role, same company, different culture. The Americans are proud of their 70-hour weeks. But look at performance over 5 years. The Swedes outperform. Look at retention rates. The Swedes stay. Look at innovation. The Swedes produce more breakthrough ideas. Not because they're smarter, because they're rested. This is the golden filter that ties all of this together. It's a principle that the Swedish culture understands almost instinctively, but most American culture has completely forgotten. The principle is called respect for rhythm. Your body has rhythm. Your nervous system has rhythm. Your creative capacity has rhythm. Your life has rhythm. And when you respect that rhythm, when you work hard and then rest deeply, when you're focused and then unfocused, when you're available and then unavailable, you actually become excellent at everything you do. But if you ignore your rhythm, if you try to be constantly on, constantly available, constantly grinding, you don't become more ambitious. You become mediocre. You produce average work, you're tired. and you have the nagging sense that you're failing, even though you're working constantly. Here's your reset test. It's simple, and it will change how you think about ambition. Tonight, when you leave work, notice what time it is. Then ask yourself, do I feel like I failed to accomplish enough today, or do I feel like I respected my own nervous system? If it's the first one, that's the American model talking. That's the belief that there's always more to do, and that guilt is the currency of dedication. But if it's the second one, you're beginning to understand what the Swedes have known all along. That respect for your own rhythm is not laziness, it's integrity. It's saying, I care about this work enough to do it well, which means I care about myself enough to recover fully. Tomorrow morning, try something different. Try leaving at 5. Not because you've finished everything. You never finish everything. You leave because 5 p.m. is the boundary, and then, for the next 3 hours, don't check email. Don't think about work. Don't be available. Be fully somewhere else. Notice what happens to your mind. Notice what kind of rest becomes possible. Notice what your life looks like when you're actually present for it. Because Maya's life doesn't look like a grind. It looks like a life. And she does some of the best work of anyone in her company. Those two things aren't in conflict. They're the same thing. This isn't about being European instead of American. It's about understanding that boundaries create excellence, not mediocrity. That rest is a productivity tool, not a luxury. That your nervous system isn't infinite, and treating it like it is doesn't make you ambitious. It makes you exhausted. I want to hear from you. How many hours did you work today? Not officially work, actually work, focus, create. And how many hours did you spend looking like you were working while actually being nowhere? Tell me in the comments, because I think you'll find that most of your hours fall into the second category, and the Swedish model is saying something radical. What if we just stopped pretending? If this opened your eyes to what sustainability actually looks like, share it with someone in your life who's been grinding themselves into dust thinking it's the path to success. They need to know that it's not. The path to excellence is knowing when to stop. I'll see you in the next one.